The hotel, the Majestic, was a real institution in the city. Perched in the heart of the most prestigious district, it stood like an architectural jewel, a place where luxury was expressed in its smallest details. The sculpted stone facade, decorated with discreet gilding, was reminiscent of 19th-century European palaces. As soon as one walked through the huge glass doors, the opulence of the place was immediately striking. The entrance hall extended under a dizzying ceiling where a monumental crystal chandelier, made up of thousands of sparkling tassels. The white and black marble floor reflected the golden light that bathed the space, while pricelessly fine Persian rugs covered certain areas to soften the muffled sound of footsteps. A subtle scent floated in the air, a sophisticated blend of jasmine and sandalwood, custom designed to give a unique olfactory signature to the establishment. The hotel was designed to offer its guests an extraordinary experience. Original works of art canvases signed by contemporary masters were displayed on the walls. On each side of the hall, sumptuous waiting rooms furnished the space with midnight blue velvet armchairs and lacquered mahogany tables. Everything was designed to impress and remind us that only the most fortunate could access this sanctuary of luxury. Among the regular clientele, we found influential businessmen, of the world-famous artists, of the politicians on the move, as well as wealthy heirs looking for exclusive experiences. Here, everything was measured by wealth and prestige. It was into this dream setting that an elderly black man entered that morning, gently pushing the revolving door of the palace. The man moved forward with a calm, almost contemplative gait. He didn't look like the hotel regulars. Their gray costume, well cut but slightly worn by time, contrasted with the refined ensembles of other visitors. He wore black leather shoes that were impeccably polished, but the edges showed slight wear. On his wrist, a classic stainless steel watch, elegant but discreet. He had no luggage, no escort, not even the confidence of the usual customers who came here as at home. Yet his keen, observant gaze scanned every detail of the decor with particular attention, as if mentally recording each element of the hotel. His face, marked by the years, bore the traces of a life rich in experiences. Deep wrinkles outlined his forehead and the corners of his eyes, but his gaze was calm, penetrating, imbued with quiet wisdom. He stood straight, with that natural elegance that only years of experience can bestow. But despite this undeniable presence, no one seemed to pay attention to him. There were no curious looks, no greetings of welcome. No staff member stood up to offer help, as they usually did for wealthy clients. In fact, most of the hotel employees pretended not to see him. It was as if he was invisible. However, he did not take offense. He continued to advance slowly, gazing at the golden frescoes on the ceiling, observing the precision of the stucco moldings that adorned the walls. His gaze rested on the reception. He stopped in front of the large black marble counter where several receptionists were working. Behind them, an illuminated wall displayed the hotel's emblem, an elegant inscription in golden letters, "The Majestic, since 1892. A young blonde man, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, finally looked up at him. His frozen smile was purely professional, devoid of any warmth. He quickly examined the man with an expert eye, probably noting that his suit bore no recognizable luxury brand signatures. He hesitated for a moment, then decided to speak. "Can I help you?" he asked in a cold and distant tone. The man gave a slight smile. "I just wanted to admire this hotel," he replied softly. "It seems he is magnificent." The receptionist discreetly pursed his lips, visibly annoyed. "Sir, we do not allow visitors to loiter without reservation. If you are not a customer, I will have to ask you to leave." The tone, although polite, was not an invitation to dialogue. It was an order disguised as courtesy. The man raised an eyebrow, but did not lose his calm. "Oh really?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. "I just wanted to take a look." "This is not possible," insisted the receptionist, crossing his arms. "Our guests appreciate their privacy." There was not a trace of doubt in his voice. In his eyes, this man could not be a customer. His appearance did not meet the standards of the hotel guests. The man did not respond immediately. He looked around, observing the comings and goings of the staff. No one seemed to notice the scene, or rather, everyone preferred to ignore it. Some employees were busy behind the counter, exchanging documents and room keys with each other, without paying attention to the conversation. Others chatted with well-dressed customers, rewarding them with bright smiles and attentive gestures. But we wanted him out. With a discreet sigh, the man turned on his heel and left the reception hall, heading towards the hotel restaurant. His step remained slow, measured, almost meditative. Every detail of this place, every interaction, was recorded in his mind. Behind him, the receptionist looked at him briefly before returning to his tasks, as if this man had been nothing more than an unpleasant parenthesis in his well-oiled morning. The elderly black man walked down the hallway leading to the restaurant. Large glass doors framed with gold moldings opened onto a majestic dining room. Inside, crystal chandeliers suspended from a delicately frescoed ceiling cast a soft light. Impeccably set tables, covered in ivory linen tablecloths, were adorned with crystal glasses and sparkling silverware. The gentle clinking of cutlery and the murmur of conversations gave the place a cozy and exclusive atmosphere. As soon as he crosses the threshold, a slender waiter in a white jacket approached him with a tight smile. His eyes, dark and piercing, detailed the man without subtlety, scanning his lightly worn grey suit, lingering on his shoes. A flash of disdain flashed across his face. "Sir, reservation is required for lunch here," he declared in a tone with a hint of impatience. The man did not let himself be taken aback and replied with his usual calm. "I'm not going to lunch, I just wanted to have a coffee."
The waiter hesitated.
His gaze became more insistent, as if he was looking for an additional reason to refuse him. "The bar is at the entrance," he finally said in a neutral voice, but betraying a slight contempt. "It will be more appropriate." This word, appropriate, made the man smile slightly. He understood perfectly what was happening. He was not chased away directly, but he was subtly shown where his place was. He didn't insist. He bowed his head slightly and turned around, heading towards the hotel bar. The bar of Majestic was just as sumptuous as the rest of the establishment. A long black marble counter veined with gold extended several meters, behind which bottles of rare spirits were lined up, arranged on backlit shelves. The padded leather seats, with purple highlights, invited relaxation and the consumption of expensive drinks. He sat on a stool, placing his clasped hands on the counter, and waited. The bartender, a man with graying hair and a smart waistcoat, didn't even glance at him. He continued to wipe a glass slowly, before turning away to converse with a waiter. 10 minutes passed. No one came to take his order. He looked around the room carefully. A young man in a designer suit had just entered. As soon as he sat down, a waiter rushed towards him, rewarding him with a warm smile and a drinks menu. A little further away, an elegant woman discreetly raised her hand, and an employee immediately came running to respond to her request. His, sitting quietly at his stool, did not exist in the eyes of the staff. He knew this technique. Calculated ignorance. Do not refuse outright, but do not serve either. Bore the person until they give up on their own. But he was not one of those who let himself be ousted so easily. Finally, after 15 long minutes, he slowly raised his hand and called a waiter. "Can I have a coffee, please?" The waiter, a dark-haired young man with a closed face, turned to him, looking visibly annoyed at being interrupted in his routine. He nodded half-heartedly. "Of course," he replied in a flat voice before disappearing behind the counter. Again 10 minutes flowed. Finally, a cup of coffee was placed in front of him. Lukewarm. No spoon.
No sugar.
No small chocolate, like those placed on other customers' saucers. He looked down at the white cup with gold edges, observing the brownish liquid with an impassive gaze. He doesn't say anything. He showed no reaction. He picked up the cup delicately and brought a sip to his lips. The coffee was bland, prepared without care. He put the cup down slowly. Then he straightened his back slightly, took one last look at the room, and smiled imperceptibly. What these employees didn't know It's that soon, it would be up to them to wait. After a few moments, Mr. Diallo put down the cup of lukewarm coffee, looked at him one last time, then slowly got up. His step was still as measured, his gaze still as piercing. Nothing in his attitude betrayed the inner storm that was brewing within him. He was a man who had learned to control his emotions. But that didn't mean he tolerated disrespect. He left the bar, crossed the lobby and walked towards the reception counter. The receptionists, absorbed in their screens and their quiet exchanges with wealthy clients, paid him no attention. He had to clear his throat to catch their gaze. The young blonde employee who had greeted him coldly earlier finally raised his head, a hint of annoyance in his eyes. "Yes?" he asked with the same forced politeness as before. "I would like to see the hotel manager," Diallo said calmly. The receptionist raised an eyebrow. "Do you have an appointment?" "None." He paused, before adding with unwavering serenity. "But tell him that Mr. Diallo wants to see him. He will understand." A slight frown crossed the employee's face. This name meant nothing to him. However, he complied without conviction, picked up the phone and dialed a number. "Mr. Lefebvre?"
Acertain.
"Mr. Diallo wants to see you." A silence. Then, suddenly, the receptionist's posture changed. His back stiffened. His eyes widened slightly, and his voice lost its condescending confidence. "Right away, sir." "All right." When he hung up, he no longer dared to meet Diallo's eyes. Less than a minute later, the doors of an office opened suddenly, and a man in a three-piece suit rushed out. Mr. Lefebvre, the director of the Majesté, stepped forward quickly, almost hurriedly, and immediately held out his hand with a tight smile. "Mr. Diallo," he exclaimed in a trembling voice. "What an honor to see you here." The entire hall seemed to freeze. The receptionists exchanged blank looks, their faces changing from contempt to incomprehension. The waiter who had turned him away from the restaurant felt a cold sweat running down his back. The bartender, who had deliberately ignored him, looked away awkwardly. Diallo, for his part, contented himself with a neutral smile. "I decided to make a surprise visit," he explained calmly. "But it seems that my appearance did not meet the reception standards of your hotel." Monsieur Lefebvre opened his mouth, desperately searching for an answer. "Mr. Diallo, I am sincerely sorry."
If he had known.
"Exactly," Diallo cut in, his gaze darkening slightly. "You didn't know. And that's the problem." A heavy silence fell over the hall. All the employees instinctively looked down. Diallo scanned the reception area, observing each of these faces which read embarrassment, fear and sudden realization. Then, he declared in a calm but firm voice, "You judged me by my appearance." A simple, slightly worn jacket. A costume that hadn't cost several €1,000. Dark skin in a place used to serving white men in impeccable suits. You decided that I wasn't worthy of attention, that I wasn't an important customer. He paused. Then, in a clear and sharp voice, he uttered the sentence that would resonate in everyone's minds. "But know this, I am the owner of this hotel." A shock.
A murmur ran through the reception, like a wave of stupor.
Some employees had difficulty hiding their surprise. The young blonde receptionist, the one who had kicked him out of the lobby, turned livid. The waiter who had looked down on him at the restaurant immediately lowered his head, avoiding eye contact. Diallo did not raise his voice. He didn't need it. The weight of his words was enough to crush the silence. He slowly crossed his arms and continued, "I am a man who has worked his whole life to build this empire." His gaze was lost in space for a moment, as if he were coming back to life in a flash. The sacrifices, the failures, the sleepless nights, the past humiliations. Then he came back to the present moment, staring at the staff again. "I started from nothing.
Annans Peraschen.
And today, you allowed yourself to treat me like an intruder in my own establishment." He shook his head slightly, a bitter smile on his lips. Hospitality is not limited to the rich or people in fancy suits. His gaze swept across the room, lingering on the employees who, an hour earlier, had not even deigned to send him a smile. Respect must be given to all. The director opened his mouth to try to justify himself, but Diallo raised his hand. I'm not here to listen to excuses. He didn't need an apology. The apologies were fleeting. They did not change an ingrained mentality. Then he announced in a firm tone, I'm going to organize a meeting with all the staff. His gaze grew harder. Because believe me, from now on things will change. And with these words, he turned on his heel and left the hall, under the stunned looks of everyone. Behind him, the silence weighed heavily on the once relaxed atmosphere of the Majestic. But Diallo knew that, soon, nothing would be the same again. The next morning, an unusual atmosphere reigned in the hotel. The employees were tense, aware that the meeting that was about to take place would not be a simple formality. They knew something had changed. The conference room was spacious, decorated with high ceilings and dazzling chandeliers. A long mahogany table sat in the center, surrounded by leather armchairs. But today, the opulence of the place brought no comfort. The employees entered one by one, some lowering their eyes, others displaying poorly concealed nervousness. They knew why they were there. At the head of the table, Mr. Diallo was already seated, his hands crossed in front of him. His gaze, calm but piercing, swept the room. He observed each employee carefully, seeking to capture their emotions, to read the weight of the day before on their faces. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but she carried within her an indisputable authority. You learned an important lesson yesterday, he began slowly, his gaze moving from one employee to the next. You never know who you're facing. The employees held their breath. But beyond that, you shouldn't wait until someone is rich or influential to grant them respect. A heavy silence followed his words. Some instinctively lowered their heads, fully realizing the monumental error they had made. Diallo leaned back slightly in his chair and paused before continuing. This hotel is a symbol of excellence. He placed his hands on the table and looked at the faces in front of him. But excellence is not measured only by the quality of the rooms, the luxury of the decor, or the reputation of our customers. His gaze lingered on the young blonde receptionist, who was blushing slightly under his attention. Excellence begins with humility and humanity. He let his words hang in the air, allowing them to permeate everyone's minds. The room was plunged into solemn silence. Some employees exchanged discreet glances. Everyone knew that this meeting was not a simple admonition. It was a turning point. Diallo, still calm, continued in a more measured tone. I am not a man who tolerates arrogance or contempt. Yesterday I saw how you treat customers based on their appearance. He shook his head slowly. This is not just professional misconduct. It is a moral fault.
A slight chill ran through the room.
Some employees seemed to want to apologize, but Diallo was not there to listen to empty words. He was waiting a real change. He straightened up slightly and concluded, in a firm tone. From today, new training will be put in place. Training on respect, ethics, and welcome. He stared at the director, who immediately nodded. Because from now on, no one will ever have to feel invisible in this hotel again. His gaze looked around the room one last time. Excellence cannot be decreed, it is practiced. Each day. And I hope you can be worthy of it. The employees nodded slowly, some still in shock, others deeply affected by this lesson. When they left the conference room, they knew the hotel would never be the same again. But above all, neither do they.